Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. And today we've got some major breaking developments coming straight out of Boston that every Red Sox fan needs to pay attention to. Because the roster decisions being made right now are not just routine spring training moves. They're shaping the entire direction of the 2026 season. And there are a few names at the center of it all that are starting to spark serious conversations inside the organization and across the fanbase. Especially when it comes to young talent stepping up, veterans being evaluated, and a few surprising decisions that could completely shift the outlook of this team. And one of the biggest storylines right now is the unexpected rise of Connelly Early, who has gone from a prospect with long-term potential to a legitimate roster piece heading into opening day after an impressive spring that forced the front office to make a bold call. Because despite earlier expectations that he might start the year in the minors, his perfo romance was simply too strong to ignore, and reports now confirm that Boston has included him on the opening day roster, a move that caught a lot of people off guard given how the rotation was initially projected to shape up. Now what makes this even more interesting is the context behind the decision, because the Red Sox are not just rewarding performance here, they're also managing workload concerns with key starters and trying to build early season depth, which means Early isn't just making the team as a feel-good story, he's actually being trusted with a meaningful role in the rotation. Even if the exact long-term plan is still being figured out behind the scenes, and that kind of flexibility is exactly what Boston needs right now as they navigate injuries, pitch limits, and the natural uncertainty that comes with a young, evolving roster. And at the same time, this decision signals something important about how the organization is viewing its prospects, because players like Early are no longer being treated as distant future pieces, they're being given real opportunities to contribute immediately. And when you look at his numbers this spring, it's easy to see why. With strong command, solid strikeout ability, and an overall poise on the mound that gives the coaching staff confidence he can handle big league hitters, even in high-pressure situations. But while pitching has been grabbing headlines, the position player side of things is where things get really fascinating, especially when you start talking about players like Wiley Abreu and Masataka Yoshida, because this is where the roster starts to get crowded and decisions become much more difficult. And right now, both of these players are at the center of a bigger conversation about lineup balance, defensive alignment, and long-term offensive production, with Abreu continuing to show why he's such a valuable asset after a strong track record in the outfield and at the plate, bringing power, defense, and consistency, while also being a key part of Boston's recent success, including a standout 2025 campaign where he delivered clutch performances and demonstrated his ability to impact games in multiple ways. At the same time, Yoshida's situation is more complicated, because while he's clearly a talented hitter with the ability to make contact and drive the ball, the Red Sox are still trying to figure out exactly where he fits best within the current lineup structure, especially with other outfielders and designated hitter options competing for playing time. And this is where roster construction becomes more than just numbers on paper, because the team has to balance offensive output with defensive efficiency, and that means certain players might find themselves in more competitive situations than others. And as reports have suggested, the fit for Yoshida is currently one of the most uncertain pieces of the puzzle, despite his strong international performances and proven ability to hit at a high level. And here's where things start to get really interesting for fans watching closely, because this isn't just about individual performances anymore. This is about how all these pieces fit together, and whether Boston is ready to commit to a specific direction or continue rotating players based on matchups, injuries, and early season performance. And when you look at the full picture, you start to see a team that is still evolving, still testing combinations, and still trying to identify its most reliable lineup heading into a long and demanding season, and that includes evaluating young players, managing veterans, and making tough calls that could have long-term consequences for the organization, especially when it comes to development timelines and roster stability. Now let's talk about another major factor that ties everything together, and that's how this roster is being shaped not just by performance, but also by strategy. because Boston has made it clear that they're willing to experiment and adjust, whether that means carrying extra pitchers early in the season or shifting players into different roles to maximize matchups. And that's exactly why decisions like including Connelly early or juggling outfield playing time among players like Abreu and Yoshida are so important, because every move sends a message about how the team views its depth and how confident it is in its current group. And with the season just getting underway, these early decisions could set the tone for everything that follows. What makes this moment even more critical is that fans are watching closely, and expectations are rising, because after a season of ups and downs, the Red Sox are trying to prove that they are not just rebuilding, but actually building something sustainable and competitive. And that means every roster decision, every lineup adjustment, and every pitching assignment carries more weight than ever before. Especially when young players are stepping into key roles and veterans are being challenged to perform at a higher level, and that's exactly the kind of environment that can either accelerate development or expose weaknesses, depending on how things unfold over the next few weeks. And if you zoom out just a bit, you can see the bigger picture emerging, because this team is clearly in a transitional phase where youth and experience are blending together, and the decisions being made right now are going to shape not just this season, but potentially the next several years. And that's why stories like Early's rise, Abreu's role, and Yoshida's situation are so important, because they're not isolated events. They're part of a larger narrative about where this team is heading. And how they plan to compete in a very tough division, and if everything clicks, Boston could surprise a lot of people, but if the balance isn't right, then these same decisions could create challenges that ripple throughout the season. So now I want to hear from you, because this is where the conversation really comes alive. Do you think the Red Sox made the right move bringing Connelly early onto the opening day roster, and how do you feel about the current situation with Wiley Abreu and Masataka Yoshida? Should the team commit to one direction, or continue rotating and evaluating early in the season? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I read as many as I can and I want to know what the fanbase is thinking. Now, and if you're enjoying this kind of deep dive into Red Sox news, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update, because we've got more breaking news, analysis, and roster breakdowns coming your way throughout the entire season. And trust me, this is just the beginning of what's shaping up to be a very interesting year in Boston baseball.